that I've had so far this year. It's been crazy. Probably double the amount that I normally have. And that goes for the district, and I imagine for the state too, with other agents. But hey, I'm in the same boat as well. I just bought 4 citrus trees, so I'm ramping up for the warm season too. So great to have everyone with us tonight. My name is Ray Baudry. I'm the County Extension Director. With me on the presentation is Julie McMillan. She's our Family and Consumer Science Extension Agent. And Nitra Mahan, our Administrative Assistant, is behind the scenes this evening. She'll be displaying some links to the websites that we're going to reference, as well as some of the documents that we'll reference as we move through the presentation. We have 30 slides. I'm not sure if it's going to take the hour and a half, but I wanted to make sure we had enough time definitely for some Q&A. We'll hold off answering any questions until the end, but if you have any questions throughout, feel free to just type them in the chat box, and we'll go through those at the end of the presentation. So I always like to start a presentation off by kind of giving you some upcoming events with Gulf County Extension, in particular horticulture resources. There's a couple of area Master Gardener volunteer program courses that are about to kick off next month. One's in Wakulla County and the other's in Franklin County. Actually, the Wakulla County Extension Office manages the Franklin County Master Gardener program. And I believe those are around April the 7th. So it's about a month or so off from starting. So if you're interested in a Master Gardener program, I believe there may be still space available for the classes in Franklin County, which will be in East Point. Gulf and Bay counties, we're not hosting a course this year. We'll evaluate at the end of the year, beginning of next year, and see where we stand. We're really both Bay and Gulf counties are at capacity at the moment with volunteers, as well as projects that are on the books. Also, there's the Gardening in the Panhandle Live series. Some of you may have already tuned into this. This happens on certain Thursdays of the month. It's a panel discussion amongst extension agents, horticultural agents primarily. Again, it's on noon on Thursdays. And there are various topics, monthly topics. This month is spring vegetable gardening. So I didn't plan this, but it just kind of turned out this way that that's going to be tomorrow's panel discussion that's on Facebook, as well as it'll be on Zoom as well. So you may have already registered for that. So this is kind of a nice segue tonight, this talk into that talk. I'm actually teaching or being on the panel for Gardening in the Panhandle Live, but it won't be until I think the fall. And one month I'll be on an invasive species panel, and then the next month I think is intro to beekeeping. So stay tuned for that if you're interested in that. Anyway, more webinars in 2021. I imagine we'll here at Gulf County Extension we'll be doing a few more webinars this year. Hopefully we'll get to a point where we're doing more in-person events. Right now we're not doing any, but hopefully for the years out we're doing some more talks in person. And believe it, we miss those kind of things too, interacting with the public on that level. You can stay in touch with us through our website, which is a little bit of a work in progress at the moment. But Facebook and Instagram are probably the best places. Also, you can catch us. Julie and I write an article in the Star periodically. There's also the Northwest District newsletters, if you'd like to subscribe to those. One's Gardening in the Panhandle for horticultural enthusiasts, and then there's the Family and Consumer Science newsletter known as Living Well in the Panhandle. So please, if you have a chance, check those out. So the contents of this presentation, and we're going to hit you with a ton of info, I know, and it's going to be information overload, but you can always call on us. We'd be happy to talk with you about any of these topics further, during the day or through email, through phone call or whatever. we greatly like to speak with you about these things if you have more questions. But I'll talk about planning and design of the garden, and hopefully you're kind of in that mind frame at the moment. Maximizing space in a garden, the vegetable crops that can be grown in Florida, along with soils and composting, which can go hand in hand. Garden management, and then Julie's going to talk a little bit about health and wellness of a garden and what it can do for you health-wise. So I really can't start these kind of conversations about gardening, garden planning especially, without talking about the Florida Vegetable Gardening Guide. This is really a one-stop shop handy guide, and I think Anitra is going to put the link for it in the chat as well. What's great about it is there's general tips on gardening in the beginning, kind of helps you, as you can see on the front page there, starts talking about the plan. But there are really three great tables in the guide. One table talks about planting dates per vegetable crop, and it breaks it down into North, Central, and South Florida, so you know what's going to grow where. The expected yields of each respected vegetable crop, days until harvest, row spacing, plant spacing, and whether or not it's a good crop to transplant or is it just better to seed. Great information. There's another table also that talks about the suggested varieties to be grown in the state of Florida, and actual remarks from our researchers regarding state research on the different vegetable crop varieties. Again, it's a wealth of knowledge, and we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go through the presentation. And there's also a table of best management practices for pest management, I should say. Kind of a general table that can be very useful as well. Another great resource is our Panhandle Produce Pointers website, where if you're a visual learner and tables really aren't your thing, there are two really nice infographics on there you may prefer. They're color coded, as you can see here. One's labeled in production. So this is the in production guide. So in production is technically the planting times. So the months are really not set in stone, but they just indicate that really the best time to plant these crops. And you can see the crops on the left-hand side of the chart there. Dates for spring gardening, if you kind of look through that, is March through May is really your best time for your warm season planting dates. The earlier the better, and we'll get to that in a minute too. Pepper, there's a host of peppers that can be planted. Tomatoes, some of your usual suspects there, peppers and tomatoes, you'll see a lot grown here. Your heat tolerant and drought tolerant transplants are going to be your better options here. You can also, there's a really interesting native tomato that I found out about recently, and I'm really itching to plant. Check out a native called the Everglades tomato. It's one of these swamp dwelling, kind of in between a grape or a cherry tomato. This plant loves the scorching hot summers. Fruits in about approximately 50 days. You'll need some area for just a few plants because these tomato plants really run, and they produce a lot of fruit. They're very interesting plant that a client turned me on to. So, and you can find these transplants through mail order, and you can find the seed. I found the seed at Johnny Seed and Dupree and a couple of other places. So there's seed out there if you're interested in germinating that tomato plant. Very interesting, and a native too. So, but you'll definitely need some area because they're very large plants. And then other usual suspects here: cucumber, eggplant, okra, Any of the summer squashes, the yellow and the zucchini are good to grow here. Peas, beans, especially Kentucky Wonder pole beans are really great to grow here. And of course, corn. Get a lot of questions about corn. Great crop to grow here. You want to definitely plant that earlier than later. Due to the insect populations that we have here, about the time July 1st hits. So we'll talk a little bit more about that too as we get to the presentation. But what would summer be without watermelon and cantaloupe, right? Those are two fruit crops that you can also grow. And I had to shamelessly plug that because I'm from Cordele, Georgia, we're the watermelon capital of the world. So anyway, on to yet another infographic, which as you can see is very similar to the last. It's just labeled in season. So in season means harvest. So this one this is about the time you would expect to harvest this particular vegetable crop. As you can see by the chart, the dates are really somewhere around June or July for most crops that are warm season crops. I would again highly recommend planting in March. Very early April is fine. You get into April a little bit and it prolongs the season, and then you start having a lot of your vegetable crops come off in July and even August, and you'll just need to really count on using a lot of insecticide probably once July hits, but to get ahead of that insect invasion that's definitely coming for pest management purposes, to plant a little bit earlier is better. Now we always get that, April cold snap, but to me that risk outweighs the having to spray so often for pests in the garden. You can really omit tomatoes and peppers from this as far as the most crops being harvested in that time frame, especially if you have indeterminate tomatoes. You may have tomatoes in November if they make it that far, much like peppers. So tomatoes and peppers really will grow throughout the year. I promise this is the last infographic. Well, there's one more, but the last type of infographic that I'll have about planting your vegetable garden. Not to bombard you with infographics, but the State Master Gardener website has these really great monthly infographics, and you can go to this Gardening Solutions website that you see noted in the right-hand corner. And it's great because there are these monthly sort of edible plant calendars. And here's the one for March, and you can see, I like how they have it broken down in this, what survives transplanting, what, may need a little help, maybe a little iffy to transplant that time of year, and what you will, should be able to easily seed in a garden. And of course that seed category there, the last block, is always going to be very populated with the number of varieties of vegetable crops that you can grow. But you can see your arugula, your eggplant, kohlrabi, some of these are kind of going to be phased out of the April calendar. But this time you can easily seed your beans, corn, cucumbers, okra, plant onions by seed or by bulbs. It's going to take a lot longer for them to grow, obviously by seed, but peas, radishes, your squash, and your zucchini, and watermelon, cantaloupe this time of year. Now on to the April calendar. You can see sweet potatoes, Swiss chard, and tomatoes. You can lump peppers into that too for the north as far as transplanting a garden, and then pretty much basically the same list of seeds. Again, always be concerned a little bit about the April cold snap. There's not a lot that we can do about that, or really anything we can do about that. Transplants can take a hit. Newly germinated seed crop can take a hit as well, but I think it's really worth the gamble to go ahead and plant early just to get ahead of some of those insects and the diseases that are out there. On to herbs. So spring herbs, and this is really a pretty nice size list of herbs for spring. The list gets really a lot smaller when it comes to fall herbs. But herbs are great to plant in your garden. It's great to supplement, your diet with herbs. It's a good way to, spice up the vegetables that you're collecting from harvesting from your garden. And they're often really good for you, and a way to curb even salt intake as well. That's often some of these herbs are a great combatant to excessive salt in someone's diet. So think about planting some herbs if you like those. I always tell folks too, it's planting herbs is really great especially if you have a spot in your garden where it's just really difficult to manage. It's not a great place, it's like the end of a row or corner of a row that you always have trouble with for whatever reason. It's a good that's an excellent place to place an herb garden. It really is. Some of these corners, some of these spots that are just, for lack of a better term, hard to sort of farm as a garden would be great for an area for herbs. Now you can also, plant small beds if you're into raised beds for these herbs, or planters, or even pots on your back deck. I've done that before. All of these really grow well here. Whether they're annuals or perennials, they'll grow well as long as they, have the nutrition to make sure they're in some good soil and they're getting plenty of moisture. They're not drying out. All these, the coriander, basil, lemon balm, chives, sage, dill, marjoram, thyme, oregano, lavender, tarragon, parsley, large list of herbs that do really well to plant here in the spring. It's best to keep it can be a headache, let's just say, if you plant the annuals and the perennials more so together. Because obviously some are going to die off, and you're going to have patches in your herb garden. So it would be my recommendation or suggestion to plant perennials together in an area and annuals together in an area. It's just a little bit easier to manage. Parsley is a little bit of a wild card. You can plant it really probably in either, but I've seen gardeners just plant it by itself. Parsley is a biennial, so it's a little different than the annuals and the perennials, because it's gonna grow and put on leaves the first year, and then it's gonna seed the second year. So it's really best to kind of keep it contained by itself in its own plant or its own part of the vegetable garden. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about, now that we've spoken a little bit about the crops and what can be grown in the garden, let's talk a little bit about garden design. And really it comes down to traditional versus alternative methods. There's a lot of ways to design a garden, and it's really going to depend really on what you're looking for, what your backyard is set up for, and what fits best on your land. Traditionally, flat ground gardens, raised beds, large containers, even Home Depot buckets. I mean, that's something that all really falls into the same category. I would highly recommend raised beds, especially in the south end, due to the sandy soils that we have, and just the potential for leaching and nutrients. It's a water quality concern for one thing, but it's also difficult, to grow crops in sandy soils, and you just have to put so much commercial fertilizer down if you're not going to amend with organics, that the costs can go through the roof. So well-drained soil is really good, but super well-drained soil, not so good. So good thing about the raised beds is they'll hold that organic material that you put in it. And it's really easier too to manage the pH of these beds, nutrient and pH, which are really key. Another side of that too with the raised bed is amending the soil can be a chore as opposed to a flat ground garden. If you need to amend a flat ground garden, you can bring in, or some mushroom compost or some sort of really good compost and just till it in. With a raised bed, it can be really a workout compared to that, and even a small raised bed. And you'll look at probably every 2 years having to amend. So you're talking about taking soil out of the bed, mixing it with some, new compost and fertilizer and putting it back in. So bed height is something really as a topic to consider. Some people like these taller beds like you see in the pictures, but that's a lot of soil to have to amend. At the end of the day, it's a lot of soil to put into the bed as well to start it. So just something to think about. But a lot of people don't like to bend over very, they want it a little bit more manageable. I like an 18-inch high bed that's 3 by 9, 3 foot by 9 foot. That's about the size that I like. I like to buy lumber that way anyway. 12-foot piece of lumber, and you cut 3 feet off one end, and that makes it easy. There are alternative methods too, like the high tunnel that you see in the bottom right. Helps reduce moisture loss, really helps with pest issues and sunburn. So you do see some gardeners going to that extent. Really helps regulate some temperature as well. The cold frame, which is the tunnel the picture just north of that, of the high tunnel. It's a good way to start your transplants a little bit earlier. You've got to create sort of a greenhouse environment, start the transplants a little bit earlier and get a jump on the year. Then there's also in your far left top corner, hydroponic gardening, which I know there are some people that are doing this. Leafy greens, really grown in a nutrient solution. So you've got some polyethylene down and some a nutrient solution there, and then you have lettuce, and other green leafy plants, just planted straight into some, styrofoam. So I have seen some of this from time to time. If you're interested in any of these alternative or traditional means, please reach out. Let me know if you have any questions about those. A little bit more about the garden design, about site requirements of your backyard, or front yard for that matter. Full sun, you need a minimum of 6 hours during the day to really have enough photosynthesis for your garden to really produce a nice yield. Preferably near a water source. You don't want to, just make it easy on ourselves so we don't have to string water hoses across the yard, if possible. I know that's one thing I try to look for. Be sure to keep your, raised beds or your flat ground or whatever kind of gardening design you have away from any competing tree roots. Competing tree roots, they'll definitely infiltrate your raised beds, and the limbs from the trees will help block some of the sunlight in your garden. So just be careful around trees, because I can speak from experience. They've been issues with me before. And again, well-drained soil. Definitely want some well-drained soil to combat any kind of root rot that you might have. I often get questions too about how to maximize space in a garden. Is the space an issue in your backyard? And if so, and you really want to maximize that space, there are really two methods. Interplanting and creating just some wide rows will go a long way. Here's a couple of examples. One is to interplant tall and short vegetables together, like the example here with the corn and lettuce. This is a good way. This is a springtime example that can be done. There's also a cool season, fall, winter example here with carrots and radishes. where you can interplant short and long season vegetables together. Now, carrots are probably 90 plus days, where radishes are done in probably 30 days, but something you can plant together. Also creating wide rows, when you talk about turnips, mustards, and mustard and collards, the greens can be easily, the seed can be broadcast into wider rows to really maximize that space. Soils, of course, a big deal anywhere. A main topic that that we cover here at Gulf County Extension. Soil preparation, you want to definitely clear your debris. And if you're prepping a flat ground garden, want to make sure it's all clean. Amend the soil with some organic matter, and I think that would pretty much go for both the south end and the north end of the county. Till or turn, of course, and you want to make sure your pH is in that optimal range of 6 to 6.5. If it's a little bit lower than 6 and a little bit higher than 6.5, it's probably not going to be an issue. We just don't want to see soils below probably 5.5 and well above 7. That becomes an issue. There are ways to help address that issue with either sulfur or lime. So there are ways to correct that soil condition. But for a plant to uptake the nutrients that it needs, 6 to 6.5 is going to be the best pH. And your amendment mixture, 50% topsoil, 50% compost. Works well, mushroom compost, any kind of good compost. And really a general rule as well would be 10-10, say 2 pounds per 100 square foot of garden space, will really help your soil condition when you're wanting to put together a garden. I'd advise against amending any clay. I do get that question from time to time. Clay can really create a condition in the end where it's just collecting too much water, too much moisture, and then you start getting some root rot issues. So really a good compost, a good organic compost is really your best bet. You may have to amend more if your soils are very sandy and native sandy soils. You're probably going to have to amend more often, but to grow a garden. But it's a lot better to do so than change kind of the whole dynamic of your soil type there to where it's really holding too much water. I had a couple of slides about composting because it really goes hand in hand with backyard gardening. Just a plug about home composting. I'm a proponent of it. I compost at my home. So the way to use yard and kitchen waste as a resource for an organic amendment. I got a crazy statistic here. According to EPA, 33 million tons of our food waste ends up in a landfill every year. So that's greater than 6 million adult African elephants or 165,000 adult blue whales. It's a pretty amazing statistic. So utilize your kitchen scraps and your yard waste and making some really good compost. More nitrogen than carbon should go into this, go into your composting bin. But fallen leaves, branches, twigs, newspaper, shredded cardboard, plates and napkins are great sources of carbon. With your greens, your vegetable crops, your tea bags, eggs, as you can see here, coffee grounds, ground clippings, clippings from green plants, as long as they're not diseased, and even farm animal manure, if you were to come across that, it's fine. And what you want to do is really layer this. It can be stirred, or it, could be stirred occasionally or not. You'll still end up with compost in the end. It may just take a little bit longer. Main thing is you don't want any kind of diseased plants, any weeds, any oils, or any meat scraps in this. You'll just, a lot of this won't break down. You'll introduce some diseases to the compost, and you'll attract raccoons and other animals to it as well. So if you keep those kind of things out of your compost bin or vessel, that would be definitely the best thing. Just some ideas about some of the vessels that you can come across. Very top, some people just dump their kitchen garbage, vegetable garden garbage waste just out in a pile and don't even use a bin at all. But a 1-bay pallet, like you see in the far left, just is a really cheap way to put together a small compost bin. You can do this in 2 to 3 bays. So you have like a pallet system where you can easily stir from one pile to the next. Um, definitely create compost a lot faster. My compost bin is the one here to the far right, kind of in the middle. It's in the corner of the fence there. And I just use really some scrap wood to be able to make that, and just some things that I could find to build it, some chicken wire and an old pasture gate. But it works great. I got some old wood stacked on top of it too, but it works really well. You can utilize all sorts of things to make these sort of vessels. The Suwannee Valley Research and Education Center has experimented with a number of different vessels. That's the bottom picture there, rectangular picture there on the slide. They utilized different materials and even production systems, and found that there was really no difference in any of the different vessels and how they performed. So in some of these production, line vessels can be really expensive to buy. So just a really good, vessel, whether it's homemade, something recycled, will work great. Just a little bit about garden management. We'll talk about mulching, watering, and fertilizing, right? All the things you'll need to do to keep your garden green and performing at an optimal level. And maybe a slide about thinking outside the box, maybe a little alternative management measures that you may want to think about that may be helpful and kind of neat. Mulching, benefits of mulching, it's great. Main really probably benefit is going to be weed suppression, just reducing the amount of weeds. You can see in this picture in the garden space, they decided to use some greenhouse flooring around the beds. That's a really great idea. But for using like inside the beds or on a flat ground surface, between plants, mulching can retain soil moisture, moderate soil temperature. Another great thing is that you won't have any contact with the soil, with fruit, so there's going to be less disease there. And over time, if you use organic mulch, they're just going to decay and actually turn into some pretty good soil. So that's one thing to think about as well. So let's talk about organic versus inorganic. Organic hay or pine straw work great. I'm not advocating like with this picture where somebody used leaves to really cover their garden. It's a great way to, again, suppress weeds and keep moisture in. But it would be fine to use that, within the row and not, in the walking paths too. But to each his own, it works. But I wouldn't necessarily advocate for that. Hay and pine straw, again, work well. Pine straw and bark, certainly, if you have blueberries, that can help lower the pH and keep the blueberries thriving. Any leaves, oak leaves work great. Bark, wood chips, sawdust, peanut hulls, all great uses and will break down as mulch over time. Some of the inorganics, there's plasticulture that you can put down, like visqueen, if you want to utilize something like that. Inorganic, so you'll have to pull it up every year and redo it. It can be laborsome and cumbersome. Newspaper and cardboard are fine. And matter of fact, a lot of times people use that along with hay or pine straw or leaves on top, kind of getting a little bit of both worlds going there with organic and inorganic. Newspaper can often have, in the past, have had, toxic dyes that say you didn't want to use that. But now I think every newspaper in the world uses a soy-based dye. So that's fine. Landscape fabric also is something that can be used. Again, it's a lot like your plastic culture where you need to pull it up at season's end or at the year's end and start over. So it can be a little work there. So on to watering, something to keep in mind is watering early in the day is really the best. Night is when many pests and diseases thrive, especially in the summertime and the warmer months. So moisture is just often the catalyst of creating problems. So watering early in the day is really the best. Really, and this is a good point. Frequency depends on weather, soil, and age of the plants. So you definitely want to be in tune to the weather and keep an eye on how much it rains. A rain gauge is great to have. Kind of keep track of it. Young plants need about an inch of water per week, and that's applied frequently for germination to occur and for these plants to really, hit the ground running as far as growing. Mature plants, when it's mid-season and beyond, watering, 2 inches per week, just applied less often is a good rule to go by. Drip versus overhead irrigation. There's a big debate over that. I'm a big proponent of drip. It's very efficient, ideal for really narrow plantings too. It's great for backyard gardening. There's minimal lateral, movement of the water, so you're not losing a lot. You're getting it right on the root system. There's not a lot of evaporation there. Clogging and leaks can be an issue though, and sometimes with water quality, especially if you're using a shallow well, filtering may be necessary. Another great point about drip is you can find kits, at your box chains and your garden centers, and it's fairly inexpensive to do. Overhead irrigation is fine. I would definitely, you could definitely use that at times during the year, but excessive overhead irrigation can cause really some fungal and bacterial diseases really to thrive. So it's just something to be aware of. I would really highly suggest using a drip system. And I also have a bullet point on here for rain barrels. I think rain barrels are great. If you have a situation where your home is set up and it's applicable to rain barrels, these are great to have. I've used them myself. And oftentimes I wouldn't use them just to capture water and to use water during a dry spell. I would keep the valve open and just let the water run to the garden at the same time, or maybe close the valve off, and after the rainstorm, the next day or next 2 days, just open up the valve and let it run. Then so the garden kind of gets a double dose of rainwater. But just something to think about. Sometimes I know the Apalachicola National Estuary and Research Reserve has rain barrel workshops from time to time. During COVID, I'm sure that's been kind of scaled back. But there are probably organizations in the area that will get to a point where they're actually having rain barrel workshops. So just kind of take a eye out on that. Fertilizer tips. I just have a few here. It's great to have a soil test done first. I have that as the last bullet. Kind of give you a customized fertilizer application for your garden, and we can do that for you. You can let us know, and we'll be glad to help you with that. 10-10-10, 8-8-8 are fine general use fertilizers to use. General recommendation is 3 to 4 pounds per 100 linear feet of row in a season. May need to side dress a crop at mid-season, especially like corn. Your plants will generally tell you when you start seeing some yellowing or they're just not growing so well, they may need a side dress of fertilizer. Your leafy kind of monocot crops like lettuce and corn, they may even need something more than a 1010 or 888. Ammonium nitrate, which is more of a 3400, pretty heavy nitrogen fertilizer, may be needed. Um, Legumes, your beans and your peas, they don't really need a lot of nitrogen. So they are actually nitrogen fixers or putting nitrogen back in the soil. So yeah, something to think about there. You may not need to fertilize them with a high nitrogen fertilizer as much. Root and fruit crops, they're definitely going to need some potassium as soon as you know that it's time for development of those kind of crops. A potassium sulfate application, one application a year would do wonders for those crops. And just follow the directions on the fertilizer bag for that, for the potassium sulfate. But I can also give you a recommendation if you'd like to talk further about that. And thinking outside the box, like I was talking about a little bit earlier, thinking about pest management and nutrient management. So here's a 9x3 raised bed that I have. It's approximately 18 inches tall that I have in the opposite corner of my yard from my compost bin. But I plant sunflowers in this, and this is a way to bring in beneficial insects. Now, this could be planted with native plants or pollinator plants. There's a number of, you wouldn't have to necessarily plant with sunflowers. I just like sunflowers. But this is a way to really draw some really good beneficial insects into your ecosystem there that will drastically reduce your pests, your insect pests, because they'll be feeding on them as well. So just something to think about. You may want to plant some of those kind of plants around the border of your garden. Another is cover crops. We probably don't think about cover crops as much, with backyard gardening as we do with, agricultural applications, but using legumes and grains at different times of the year, when you're not using your vegetable garden space, say you want to not have a winter garden this year, but what do? Well, cover crop is something great to plant in the off season. It prevents erosion. In flat ground gardens, it helps retain nutrients that's there from the garden before. It helps stop any kind of leaching. Helps kind of recycle and restore nutrients because this will eventually be tilled back in when you begin to plant your spring garden. Also, it can provide some mulch and cover, during the growing season of a garden too. It can also be used for mulch. Also provides habitat for beneficial insects again, and birds who like to pick off insects as well. These bad insects that can give your vegetable gardening a bit of a fit. So think about that. Cover crops may be something you might want to entertain at some point. Water cover crops for winter, there's going to be clovers, red clovers, vetch, there's oats, there's winter rye, just to name a handful. There's even some for summer. There's some summer legumes and grains that can be used, like cowpea and sorghum and buckwheat that, yes, you can plant in a garden. So anyway, just something to kind of think about. An alternative kind of management measures that you may want to implement to your garden. And my last slide, before we get to Julie, I wanted to talk a minute about controlling diseases and insects in the garden. And this is the famous tomato hornworm that I've seen too many in my life, I feel like. But using integrated pest management is really and this is a stepping stone approach really to managing pests in your garden. And it's really a way of being as environmentally friendly as possible um, in combating pests in your garden. And it all starts with, this cultural control where you're watering, you're fertilizing, you're mulching appropriately, you're promoting a healthy environment, you're creating that environment where it's going to thrive. Um, Once you stop watering and fertilizing appropriately, especially a lot of times that's when the weeds, that's when the other insects come into play and cause problems. So anyway, a healthy system is going to promote really great health in a garden. Mechanical control. So if you have an outbreak of an insect or weeds, this is something where you mechanically, physically remove or dispose of the pest. Biological, there are a couple of biological controls that come to mind, and that would be, for example, the parasitoid wasp that you can actually purchase and let go on your property if you have citrus trees. And they are, they'll go after this Asian citrus psyllid. And that's the insect that causes the citrus greening that's been so devastating in our citrus crops across Florida. Um, but they're a great parasite for those facilities, and they are a native species as well, so that's good. Um, the parasitoid wasp is. Um, BT is something that's used a lot, whether it's in agricultural means or if it's in backyard gardens. BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, or known as BT, is a good bacteria. It's actually, it's not harmful to humans at all, but it's toxic to caterpillars. So it would take care of this tomato hornworm here. And then last but not least, the final step in this IPM strategy is chemical control. It's kind of like you're kind of you've gotten to the point where you don't have any other options, and chemical control looks like what's needed. Home remedies, insecticidal soaps that you can purchase almost anywhere. Neem oil is a great chemical control. Even lemon or a vinegar spray can help. Only problem with these kind of home remedies, though, we get a heavy dew or rainfall and you have to apply again. And sometimes they're just not strong enough to combat some of the pests. There are some registered pesticides that are insecticidal soaps, like Safers and EcoBlend, that are a little bit stronger to use if you're looking for something a little more organic. But at the end of the day, if it warrants it, commercial insecticides would be something that would be the last step in the process of removing a pest from a garden. And you would always like to read the disclaimer if you need to, definitely follow the manufacturer's application directions, including the precautions. And two that are very important is the reentry, which will be an REI, which will give you how many hours or how many days that you can go back into a garden after you've sprayed. And the other was the pre-harvest interval. And that means how long after you've sprayed can you harvest the crop and it's safe to eat. But just a couple of acronyms there to be aware of when you're reading on some of these commercial insecticides. So let me move on and allow Julie to begin her presentation. She'll be talking about health and wellness this evening.
All right. Thank you so much, Ray. I enjoyed listening to all that. I know that this weather has got me wanting to be outside a lot more, and we're fixing to spring forward this weekend. So we'll get a little bit longer daytime hours outside. So I'm sure we will all be outside trying to get into our gardens. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the health and wellness side of fresh fruits and vegetables, which is always a positive when you're growing your own and planting your own crops. And so we're always hearing about a balanced diet. And you think, okay, well, how do I know what that is? What is that? But a balanced diet includes avoiding too much of some foods, but then making sure that you get enough of the others. And so a lot of times you want to make sure that you include fruits and vegetables because they're low in calories, but they're also packed with fiber, vitamins, and minerals. And you want to get the adequate intake of fruits and vegetables so that it can help you control your weight. And it might reduce the risk of cancer or other diseases. So the fiber and the water in fruits and vegetables will help you to fill up. And then the more you have in your diet, you can really leave with, that'll lower the calories and the fat, and so it will leave you where you don't feel as hungry throughout the day if you eat more fruits and vegetables. And so with that, I wanted to go to our next slide. And so that leaves us thinking, well, do you know how many calories your body needs every day? And when I was doing a little bit of research to speak to you guys tonight, I came across this really neat calculator on the USDA site, and it will help you to figure that out if you don't know. So you just need to put a few things in, your age, male or female, your size, and if you're active. So we're going to do that really quick while we're on here, just to show you how easy it is, but it's very interesting information and something we probably all would like to know. So on here we'll use me. So I am female, 38 years old. And then I am 5'6" and weigh 150 pounds. And on the activity level, unfortunately, I am low active right now. I had a baby 5 months ago and always thought I was pretty active, but we've been not quite as active since I had her. So maybe with the weather change and all that, I can get outside with her a little bit more and get a little more active. But so once we submit that, it's going to tell you a little bit about what you might need, so you can see what you're missing or what you think if you're missing something, if you're not, but just good information when you're looking at what you're eating. And so I thought it was pretty neat how it even broke down the protein and the fat, but then the vitamins, because we do get a lot of natural vitamins and minerals when you're eating fruits and vegetables. So there's that. And but that's just kind of a little fun interactive tool that I thought you guys might enjoy. And so we'll have that link there also for you, and you can go and put your own information in and see what you need or don't need. I know I need to print mine out and post it somewhere so I can get a good handle on things sometimes. So, but this was just a little quick interactive tool that you can use whenever you get a chance, and it'll let you know kind of what you need. Of course, you can always go to a doctor or a dietitian, I should say, and they'll help you figure those things out. But this was just something you can do on your own, and it might tell you something you don't know. So all right, so next we will move on to just a little bit of talk, which I know I probably don't have to tell everybody this, but just the benefits that you get from gardening. You get fresh air and sunshine, exercise, especially in the middle of the summer when it's really warm and you're out there making sure there's no weeds or picking things. I'm sure you get sometimes plenty of exercise out there. It is enjoyable. There's a lot of mental health benefits. They're nutritious when you're eating fresh vegetables out of your garden. And not to mention, you save money, as well as I'm sure there are so many other benefits, but we live in Florida, so you can grow vegetables and fruits almost all year as long as you pay attention to the correct planting dates, which Ray talked about a little earlier tonight. So we are in a good spot to have gardens here in Florida. And next, there's a thing called a functional food. And so you're thinking, what does that mean? A functional food is something that provides, it usually has some kind of added component that's going to provide beyond the basic nutrient that naturally is in that food. So it might help to reduce the risk of a disease, or might help you with some kind of health issue you have. So I put an example on there. And so the functional food we were looking at, since we were talking about growing these things, and I know the first thing when it becomes spring that I always think about planting is tomatoes. I don't know if anybody else does, but that's my favorite thing, to have a homegrown tomato. And then in the summer, watermelon. My husband makes fun of me because he said I can I'll just open one and eat the whole half by myself. So those are probably my two favorites, so they stuck out. But the functional component that they have is lycopene. And so what you benefit from that is it can lower your risk of prostate cancer and reduce your cholesterol, your blood pressure, and also improve the function of your heart. And there are several others. There's like citrus has flavonoids, which reduces the risk of some cancers. Cranberries have, let's see if I can pronounce this, proanthocyanins, which lowers your risk of a urinary tract infection. So a lot of these vegetables that we're growing, we don't realize it, but they might be a functional food that can actually help us with our health. And so the link is included here on the slide, and we're going to also make sure that we get that to you guys if you wanted to read a little further on functional foods and what their components are and what's in them and how they can help you. And again, I just wanted to touch on mental health. You know, gardening, it's the physical element of it is going to always improve your health, but then also there's a mental portion, because whenever you are physically doing something, it'll release mood enhancing endorphins. And so when you're exercising, and so it's a recommendation to always exercise, because you're going to release those endorphins, and that's going to kind of combat depression. And it can also, you know, if you don't want to go to the gym, I'm sure you can get a good workout in your yard. Some of us have larger yards than others. I know we have a big place, a farm with horses, so there's plenty of work there. I've never felt like I had to go to the gym, and I actually, even when I walk and jog, just go around the property there. So the only time the gym is really nice though is when it's wet, so your shoes don't get so dirty. But I'll enjoy being outside and in the garden. And on here I just wanted to put a few things like the green leafy vegetables. I don't know anything that you guys read, but you've probably always read that is really good for mental health. And especially as we get older, they're supposed to help slower the decline of your brain function. So they're always helping you to remember and learn and make decisions. And then I put a few other vegetables on there since we were looking at the chart and things we might think about growing this year. And so now the video, I will apologize, it's not the best video, so I'm going to try to fix it before we send it to everyone. But wanted to share with you a recipe here in the end of something that just has a lot of different vegetables. And one of my favorite things to eat with a bunch of different vegetables that I don't always get in other foods is a pasta salad. So we'll go ahead and play this and little video here, and we'll also be sharing this with you, this recipe. But so in this recipe, we have a green pepper, yellow pepper, a red pepper, cucumber, tomatoes. A lot of people will put olives. I did not use that. I actually made this today, so I didn't use olives today. We're not big fans of that around our house, but I know a lot of people love those, so you can use those. And I like to chop everything up really fine, so that's what we did. We used pasta, and sometimes whenever I'm making this, I just use the tricolor rotini, but today we used the spinach and cheese tortellini, so that kind of gave an added I guess a little something different this time than normal, and I'm excited. I still haven't eaten any, so maybe tonight I'll get into that. But and then it's just a basic Italian dressing on there. That dressing that I used is just a store bought, but I know there are a lot of different um, homemade salad dressings that you can make that are really good. And also, when we were talking about the pasta, if you have some dietary restrictions, you might want to use different pastas. You might want to use a veggie based pasta or a whole wheat pasta. And as you can see, we add chicken, but that's not necessary. But the chicken, really, for us, it's like a meal in one. You've got vegetables, you've got your pasta, and like I said, even in this pasta is spinach. And then the red stuff is just some salad seasoning. And I always put a little more than it says. I believe the recipe called for 6 tablespoons. And as you can see, I probably have more than that because I just really like that added on there. But it mixes together, and we make this beautiful salad, and you can have it any time of the year. It's really great with in the summer for picnics, or if you want to put it in a fancy bowl. It's really colorful and festive, so you can have it at parties. It and this one, like I said, we use the red, the green, and the yellow pepper, and then the purple onion, cucumber, and then the tomatoes. You could really use any kind, and the cherry tomatoes are my favorite, so that's what we put in there today. And then the noodles, a lot of times I've used spaghetti before, and then a lot of times I use the tricolor rotini. So mix it together, and then as far as the taste of it, you don't have to, but if you refrigerate it overnight, it just seems like all those seasonings kind of really just work together, and it tastes so much better the next day. There's just one of those dishes that after it sits for a while, it just tastes a lot better the next day. And that's really all I have. We'll share these with you. We do have again, like Ray mentioned, our social media, so we'll post it on Facebook. We can, if you want us to email it to you, we can do that. Also, we have an Instagram, and so we will share it however you would like, and we'll be putting that out there for you if you want to give that a try with some of your fresh garden vegetables this year.
Thank you, Julie. That was great. Give me just maybe about 30 seconds and I'll make the transition back to the chat. All right, thanks everybody for waiting there for a second. We'll go through see if there's any questions that we may have this evening. Thank you, Anitra, for putting all the links in. That's great. Let's see here. Okay, we just moved here last year, and I want to do a raised bed in the backyard. We don't know many good gardening stores other than big box chains can you recommend? Well, I mean, I would recommend if you're uh, looking to build a raised bed is just to, build it from scratch, really. If you're in St. Joe, we have a lumber store there. Um, if you need help, um, maybe designing your um, raised bed, I'd be glad to help with that. If you want to give me a call or send me an email. As far as like places for gardening stores, I guess I'm assuming you're looking for, maybe you're looking for plants to purchase. Really Lowe's and Home Depot will have a lot. Um, Ace Hardware, um, I believe maybe Ace Hardware in Apalachicola would probably be a good place. I don't think the Ace Hardware in St. Joe usually has any transplants. Um, the Piggly Wiggly in St. Joe will have some transplants I want to take a look at. We Are Outdoors up here in Michigan has, yeah, Renall is another one. Yeah, Renall would be a good one. We Want Outdoors here in Wewa. Renall down in St. Joe. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Anne. Anne, Grace is on with us tonight. She's one of our Gold Master Gardeners. So the Port St. Joe Library is going to have a seed library, hopefully, to kick off in early April. And I believe this will work where bring seeds and trade seeds at the library for seeds that you would like. I'm not sure exactly how their seed library is going to be set up, but it'll be something to that effect. It'll be a good place. It'll be a seed bank, basically, a good place to find seeds. So thank you for that, Anne. There's also Johnny Seeds is a good place if you're looking for seeds. Kind of hard to find seeds, maybe. The box chains will have some seeds. Johnny Paul from Wewa Outdoors will have seeds as well that you can buy in bulk, especially if you have a large garden space. If you're really interested in peppers and you want to grow some really unique peppers, there's always the New Mexico State University Chili Pepper Institute. You can find that online. They have a store and there are probably 30 different kinds of peppers or more that you can, pepper seed that you can buy from them. Ranging from, very hot peppers to very mild. So something for everybody. I've never ordered from them before, but I've always wanted to. But yeah, there's definitely seed available for these vegetable plants in the area and online. So shouldn't be too terribly hard to find. See lots of vegetables, info on them. You can take small seed packets, just get a library card. Also, the Port St. Joe Garden Club will have its plant sale on April 10th. Fantastic. All happening in April. It's going to be a big month for gardening. Let's see. Okay, great info. Thank you. Also, what do you put on the grass under the raised bed? I'm assuming before so you've built a raised bed and it's before you dump soil into the raised bed. I'm assuming you're talking about maybe there's some turf grass there. Okay. I would just use glyphosate, just a Roundup, and give it 7 days. Depending on the strength of Roundup that you use, generally though 7 days is long enough for the plant to have metabolized the chemical and for the half-life of the glyphosate to be spent. So I would say, yeah, 7 days after application, grass should be dead. Then you can just dump um, the soil on top of that and be good to go. So thank you. I'm down in Pinellas and got some great info. I will be making the pasta salad. Awesome. Thank you. That's great. All right. Thank you very much. Again, we're always here. Just give us an email, send us an email or give us a call. We'd be glad to help with any tips on gardening and especially as well as preparing the harvest from the garden, which is equally important. So if there's not any more questions, we'll probably sign off pretty soon. Again, I want to thank everybody for being on tonight. Thank you for being here for our first webinar that we've done. Again, we'll plan on probably doing one next month, very soon. Very soon. So again, thank you for joining us, everybody, and have a great evening.